got the skepticism breaking it down. He's got the answers that are waiting to be found. We mix it all up in a quantum machine, the craziest duo that you've ever seen. Oh, it's the skeptic and the disciple. Yeah, we keep it moving, yeah, we keep it vital. Faith and logic and funny business. Welcome to the show.
Welcome back to the Skeptic and the Disciple. I'm Mike Littman, the Quantum Disciple, and this is my partner in crime, Megan.
Hey everyone, partner in crime.
Yeah, a little more pep this week than he did before.
A little bit.
So a couple of interesting gossipy stuff to start with, and then we'll get into today's controversial topic as usual. And these things are all things that come up in my daily life. So usually this is stuff that's just happened to me or to us in the past week. And I mean, I guess I view it as almost kind of God leading me towards the next topic. You know, even right before we got on today, I mentioned to my wife what the topic is. Megan doesn't even know yet, by the way. So that way she's always surprised. My wife didn't like the topic. She's like, oh, why do you do that? Why don't you do something more, because she thinks some of our topics are too controversial. And, because the idea of the whole show is that Megan is our skeptic. So, while she's right there on the cusp, but frankly, I think she is a Christian. She just can't get across the line quite yet and say all this stuff and believe all this stuff. But man, if you would have seen her 6 months ago, yeah, not good.
No.
And that's not a compliment, by the way.
There's no Jesus-y in my life before that.
It's not a compliment, but God loved her anyways. Notice I said past tense, so things are a little bit on the fence right now.
Yeah, you've already made it very clear that who knows if I'm going to heaven or hell.
No, I believe that you are going to heaven. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been led to get you involved in the ministry. I just told you yesterday how thankful I am for you to be on the team, and I wasn't lying.
That is
true,
and I asked you what you did wrong. That's why I asked you, what did you do?
I make a nice comment to her. Her immediate response was, what did you do wrong this time? It's like, okay, that sounds just like my wife. As well as the coffee lady at church.
Oh, the coffee lady?
Oh, yeah. There's a very nice lady at church. She's the wife of one of the other ushers. I usher at church, like on the once a month or something like that. And so it's the wife of one of those guys. And she makes the coffee every week. And that's where, when I give money to the church, I specify it's not just coffee, it's also the coffee and snacks like donuts and stuff like that. So
I make sure it's decent stuff, not just
they put
coffee.
out a nice spread. They put out, and a lot of it is like home cooked from other people and stuff. So somebody keeps bringing bagels and schmears, and so I'm digging that. But after church, we go to church at 8 a.m, and it's over. Let's call it 9ish. Well, there's a Bible study that starts at 9:15. So we go out, I drop my stuff off, my wife and I get our table, and then I go up and load up. This thing comes with brunch.
Right.
I leave that place full. So I figured, okay, well, I'm eating pretty heavy there. I should probably give them some dough to feed off of. But anyway, this nice lady with the coffee, one time I went and took coffee from the place where the coffee is. And apparently that week it was supposed to be for someplace else. And there were signs that I didn't respect. So I got in trouble. So since that, I always ask now, because I don't want to get in trouble again.
Yeah,
I get yelled at a lot for being a bad boy. And I don't try to be a bad boy. I try to be a good boy.
Getting yelled at church, that's a new one.
Well, she wasn't really yelling at me. She was friendly, but I was scolded with her eyes.
Yes.
Let's go that route. So anyways, we've had an interesting little adventure this past week before we get into our main topic, and so we're looking at getting my truck. I have a red Dodge Ram. We're looking at getting it wrapped with some designs for the Quantum Disciple, and so Megan's got some really cool designs that I'm a big fan of. So we're looking at what is it going to cost to get the truck wrapped with this stuff. So we were going back and forth with several different places, and the price was surprisingly high based on the wraps that I currently have on my truck for my pontoon rental business, which is with a former student, and my construction equipment business, which is also with a former student. So I have all those logos on it with like a Ninja Turtles driving a pontoon boat and stuff like that. So they're a lot of fun, but I want to. My main focus in life right now is this ministry, but I was actually saying, well, maybe one more summer with the logos on it is okay to make sure that we're promoting the pontoon business for its last hurrah, because we're looking at selling that business off. But
Are you?
well, yeah, because I mean, my focus isn't there as much. And now John, my partner, John Shoddy, close friend of mine, godly man, he's an elder at his church. He was one of my grad students, and him and I, he kind of was grew up on a farm type things, very outdoorsy for an engineer. type thing. So he works as a software engineer and in the marketing industry. Well, I have him. I don't know if we mentioned on the website or not, but one of my recent investments has been in a startup company called Curova, where we apply AI to matching cancer patients to cancer clinical trials.
You didn't tell
And my
me about
connection,
this.
I did or didn't?
Did not.
Okay,
I knew
well,
you were involved with the Cancer Foundation clinic. Like, I knew you were doing stuff with that, but you didn't tell me anything about this.
Okay, well, so I'll tell you a little bit about this then, because I mean I think this will be and it'll add to the controversy of today's.
Well, side note, because the decals on your car right now, they're just like actual like a design and some words. It's not like a full wrap like we're doing, right?
Right. It's much less stuff than you've done.
Okay.
Yeah, it uses a majority of the truck's redness as its background.
Okay.
Where Megan's design has like red peeking through in specific spots, but it adds a lot of kind of blues, dark blues, light blues, kind of themed,
Black.
something like that.
Kind of almost makes your truck black.
So in any case, the idea is, so I mean, just for the quick backstory, it's on our website, but I'm guessing a lot of the viewers haven't necessarily viewed our website. But if you look at the Meet the Team link or something like that, one of the people on there is Tabitha Littman. I don't know if it's Tabitha on there or Tabby. I call her Tabby, but so that's my wife. My wife, we had our, how many years? We had our 25-year anniversary last May. So it'll be 26 years this coming May. See, I'm still decent at math.
You were married in 2000, so that's cheating, because whatever year it is, that's how many years it's been.
But I sometimes mess up the day of the month, because when we were originally planning the wedding, her birthday is June 15th. So when we were originally planning it, she was debating between the 15th and June 20th for some reason. I don't know. So I get very confused as to which did we finally pick. But the way I do it is by a memory of a time where I got it wrong.
Yep.
We'd probably been married, I don't know, I'm guessing 5-ish years, maybe less actually. But we were at this Italian restaurant for dinner, and I am telling her like, oh, make sure you leave your calendar open for, next Wednesday or whatever. And she's like, well, why? Because I thought it was the 20th, for our anniversary. And she's like, our anniversary is tomorrow. And I said, oh, well, I didn't get you anything. So from that, so now I could go back and I could do the math and decide that it's the earlier week.
Did you get her something to make up for that?
Does she need any more than me? Imagine a better gift than to bask in my presence.
That's true, but we're females.
No, I didn't get her anything.
Do you ever get her anything for your anniversary?
No.
Why? They make like cheat
actually,
sheets.
hold on.
Every
That's not
year
true.
you get something.
No, that's hold on. We got to frame this, and this is also still related to today's topic, actually. But I'm still not going to tell you the topic. Just related.
Gosh.
These are edge cases.
Keep in mind, I am not scripted at all, because I know nothing until it comes out of his mouth.
Yeah. So in any case, I mean, she has. Like, we don't have separate bank accounts or anything, or separate credit cards. So
what she wants,
has
she gets.
Our credit cards, and she'll check with me for like major purchases or something. But when she wants something or needs something, my wife's frugal. She's responsible with money. So, I trust her to buy whatever she wants or needs. And she's very specific about the exact products she wants. Like, she wants this brand, this, that, the next thing, and for all sorts of reasons. And that's fine. She gets what she wants. She's my princess.
Mm-hmm.
I want 75% off. I don't care. I want
potato
generic
salad.
Yeah, but I was telling we were joking last night around dinner, and in my freezer I have I like those Snickers ice cream bars.
Oh yeah.
But we also have, because I told her that this is my last Snickers ice cream bar, but I also have Twix ice cream bars, and then I have Butterfinger ice cream bars, which I hadn't seen
Ooh,
before.
how are those?
Well, so but I tell her, I said, yeah, Snickers. She says, is Snickers your favorite? I said, well, Snickers is my second favorite. Guess what my favorite is?
Butterfinger.
Nope. On sale. Whatever's on sale. That's my favorite flavor. If I have to pick a second, it's Snickers. um, anyways, so she can get herself whatever she wants. We usually will, we might go out somewhere if she wants to, whatever. Last year we redid so last year I would say that, I bought her, we fenced in her whole backyard, and we had the entire backyard, about 1,200 square feet, get poured with concrete and then colored and stamped so it looks like a riverbed with a river flowing through. So it has, stone on either side, and then this like kind of more reddish, and then a slate thing in the middle that's like the river, and it's all textured and stuff. This is all stamped concrete, so it looks really cool. And she designed that. So,
Thanks for sending me pictures.
I probably did back then.
Didn't I got a picture of your fence that fell over like a couple weeks after it was done.
Oh yeah, well. So anyway, she got that. I'd like to say it was entirely my idea, but this was after I had just gotten my new excavator, as one has, right? Everybody
Right.
has an excavator, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, when you live
But
in the
that's
middle
for
of
that.
a city, you need
That's
one of
for
those.
that's for the construction business. But my partner John, he knows how to use all those things, and I wanted to mess with it, so I figured, okay, so I'm gonna have a couple of tree stumps I want to get rid of in my backyard. So I figured I'd practice on those. Well, obviously, with my amazing precision, I effectively dug up the entire backyard.
Oh my God.
It's just so bad.
The mental picture I have right now is just priceless.
I have pictures of all this too. Maybe we'll post them on the website or something.
Yes.
So this needed to be repaired. So the decision was made to repair it.
Did you make John do it?
Well, actually, John started off doing it, but then we had to bring professionals in to do. We started off putting gravel back there, which was not a great idea in hindsight. But we got that all out. We got a professional in, and he was expensive, but he did a really nice job. So we were happy with the work, the quality of work. We didn't hire him because he was necessarily the cheapest. Tabby liked the stuff on his website, the work he did, and he was very particular about the stuff which she likes because she's similar to that.
Right.
Just pays a lot of attention to detail. So we could say that I got that for her for our 5th anniversary.
Okay.
Something along those lines.
Fair.
But in any case, so, we talked I don't remember if it was last episode or a couple of episodes ago. I think it was 2 episodes ago we were talking about money, right?
Yes.
So I'm part of a couple of different investment groups, and I tend to invest in stuff that, I have a heart for, as I think most people should. We should be generous givers of our resources, whatever those are. That doesn't mean write checks. It means, whatever your God-given gifts are, we should be generous in giving that back, whatever that is. Right now, Megan's working on a children's book for our ministry, and she was going on and on this morning about how amazing it's looking and stuff. So, we hope to, get that into several churches and things like that. And, again, it's all free. We want to give it to them. We'll make it free on the website, and, no barrier of entry for our stuff, but in any case, so what, if you haven't read on the website, my wife, about 3.5 years ago, it'll be 4 years in July, so I guess more than 3.5 years ago, 3.75 years ago, she was diagnosed with stage 4 bladder cancer. They gave her 2 years to live. Now, obviously, that puts a little curveball into your life. It changes everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it also makes you kind of step back and reevaluate your priorities in life. This kind of goes back to this idea of what does happiness look like? What does contentment look like? Why are we chasing the dollar? All this stuff. You start realizing, what's the old saying? You don't realize what you had until it was gone.
Yep. Something
along those lines. Having a diagnosis like that gives you that reality check that, okay, this could really actually be gone. But so, and it's in a weird way, it's let her and I grow closer together, I think. Because it's made us appreciate each other more. In the early days, she was going through lots of surgeries and stuff. So I had to pick up the the pieces from that because of the amount of stuff that she typically, does for me and for the household. I'm not good at that stuff. Anything low on the ground, I'm not going to be great at that. But, then, so she was reliant on me. I was reliant on her. We had to figure out how to do it as based on the way she was feeling and all sorts of that stuff like that. During that same time period, because I was having to do so many of these things I wasn't used to. I've had a bad back for years. I broke my back when I was 18. Well, I had 6 back surgeries last year. Back's doing great, actually, right now. So, knock on wood, I had to give up golf. I was a very avid golfer, but
Oh, you did?
that actually, well, I mean, at this point, my back's doing so well that why risk it? My golf game had already started going downhill. And now with her diagnosis, I want to spend more time with her. Even the irony in the situation. I was at my country club, golfing with my country club buddies.
Speaking of, do you still have the custom bag? Yeah, do you still have the custom bag I made? Do you still use it, or did you still use it?
I have another custom bag because that bag kind of wore out over time. Yeah, so I do have another one. And it looks cool. It's actually in the garage. We're selling all my clubs and stuff. But anyways, so I was a very avid golfer. I used to play a Golf Channel amateur tour and stuff. I'm very competitive with myself. I'm not an overly competitive person against other people, but I have very high standards for myself. So once I won a tournament on that, I was no longer interested in competing because I don't find competing that fun. I just wanted to challenge myself. But, I got pretty good at golf. I got to like a 4 index, which, people who are golfers, they'll know that that's pretty good for an amateur country club player. There are many, 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 many people at that country club who are far better than me, but I could play with anybody as a 4 index.
Have I ever told you I won an award golfing? I won it. Yeah, I was doing a golf outing and I actually won the award for closest to the tee.
Closest to the tee.
Yeah, I won an award. I won an actual prize.
Right, that means you didn't hit it very far. Yeah.
Out of all the foursomes, I won that one. So that tells you something.
So I got
about
the phone
golf.
call from my wife when I was standing on Highland 987, Highland 7, which is a par 3 at River Club in Mequon, Wisconsin. And I'm on the tee ready to hit. I get a phone call from her telling me that her doctor wants to see her at the end of the day that day to go over her test results, which didn't bode well. So we drove out there, got the news, then life shifted. So obviously it's pretty rough for several weeks there, but then you kind of, you bite your lip and just take one step at a time and start tackling this. Well, so they gave her 2 years to live. She went through all the chemo stuff, all that stuff, and she was having pretty good responses from that. But, now she's been around almost 4 years, and at this point, she's still doing well, has chemo every week. Well, it's 3 weeks on, 1 week off. But the drug she is on right now is a drug called Padcev, which when she was originally diagnosed was a drug that was in clinical trials. So had that drug not come out of clinical trials for her to be able to get it as treatment, she might not still be alive today. We don't know. So this idea of clinical trials is kind of a big deal to me. Well, it just so happened that one of the guys who runs one of the angel investment groups that I'm part of introduced me to his oncologist and who had this idea for, hey, how do oncologists match their patients to clinical trials because of the problems in the system? Oncologists aren't aware of the newest clinical trials. The clinical trials are up on clinicaltrials.gov's website. Many of them aren't up to date and all this stuff. The patients who might want clinical trials don't really have a way of searching for them for themselves. So we created a, human in the loop AI solution called Curova, which uses AI through our curated database to allow a patient and their doctor to quickly identify clinical trials that are potential fits for that patient so that they can then be quickly vetted. And then we work with another group of nonprofit what they do, their passion is they onboard patients onto clinical trials. They weren't created by us. They already existed, and the oncologist happened. This was one of his PhD students, I think, working on her. She's a doctor who's working on her PhD for research stuff. I don't know, something along those lines. But anyways, her passion is that onboarding process and taking people through a lot of times if if you're trying to get onboarded onto a clinical trial, that means you've maybe tried everything else. So,
Right.
this is a kind of a touchy thing. Well, so all these things just aligned. And so, John with the pontoon business, yeah, he could do that stuff. But at this point, we have him in charge of this Kurova business, even though I'm very passionate about it. I want to see it succeed, but I'm passionate about this ministry. So this is where I want to be spending my time, is on the Quantum Disciple ministry. So if that business was going to have a chance of taking off, it wasn't going to be with me driving the ship.
Yeah, you'd rather
I mean,
hang out with me all day than John, right?
Well, it depends. If I
At
need,
least give me a compliment.
well,
Rude.
no, but there's truth to that, but only sometimes. Just depends on
That's true.
what the situation is, and yeah, all sorts of stuff. Yeah. So in any case, John is spearheading that business along with the oncologist, and then I'm let's call it a technical consultant or something. I have a lower equity stake, but I'm mostly cheerleading from the side. But I think we have a really solid team that's doing this. John and a guy named Waleed, both former grad students of mine, Aurora WDC, which is a business analytics company in Madison, Wisconsin, that Waleed works for. So I guess technically Aurora is partnered with us from the perspective of services, because we're not necessarily their business, but their services are things that would help a new business like this.
That's amazing. That's an app that could change the world.
And we're not the only ones doing things like that. I mean, if I had my druthers, we would have gotten to market a little bit quicker than we did. But, what we have now is a really solid product. And, what we're dealing with is an oncologist who, just like my wife, is very nitpicky and wants it to be perfect. And, my feeling is right now it's more than good enough to get out there and start helping people. He's already using it in clinic for himself. But now we're starting to get it out there. We have a strong team, people who have connections to the big pharma and things like that. If we end up wanting to transition the product over, sell it to, one of the big boys who can then take it to the next level, we'll have to see. But that business is cooking, but I'm passionate about the idea of that business, not about running the business. But that's where John's time would be better spent than on the pontoon and the equipment.
So pause. How long do I have to get a pontoon ride before they're gone?
Well, I mean, at least this summer, but I mean, I'll probably always have at least one pontoon. So I don't think they're going away.
Now,
you were going to get a free pontoon ride anyway. So do you, even though I don't have the rental business?
Not if they don't exist.
You're right.
I can't get a free pontoon ride if the pontoon doesn't exist anymore.
That's
so true. Sell the business, keep the boat.
So anyway, kind of circling back to the original thing, we've been looking at getting the car wrapped, and we had found a company. I don't even remember the name of the company. I don't want to necessarily bash on them because we're not sure. But, we had gone back and forth with lots and lots of emails and the designs, and they were ready to put us on the calendar for the 18th. And we, said, hey, yeah, let's confirm the 18th. Just want to confirm the price, or can you give us a final official quote or something? And then all of a sudden we got a response that said, after further review, we're going to pass on this project, which was kind of took us aback, like, okay. So we replied asking, what was the issue, and didn't get a response from them. So, when stuff like that happens, your mind starts wandering. You start thinking about, okay, well, what went wrong? We had tried to see if they could get us in earlier than the 18th, because I'm going to be gone for the next 2 weeks. So we probably won't have podcasts those weeks.
And Mike was a little pushy.
Well, yeah. So my ideal situation was they would either do it next week or the week after, because I won't need my truck that week, and they're going to need it most of the week, apparently. But so we asked that. They said no to both of those. Then we said, okay, we'll do the 18th, blah, blah, blah. Well, so they responded saying we're going to pass on the project. We asked why, never got a response. So our minds wander, and, so we're kind of thinking, well, did they look and see that maybe we were a Christian organization and they didn't want to work with a Christian organization? Maybe the owners are atheists or have had a bad experience with Christians in the past, whatever it is. And obviously that touches on all sorts of points with our ministry, but also aligns with what we see in our social media, where you have many people who come in angry. And while to a practicing Christian, you kind of wonder where that's coming from. But, I think that I make well, I feel like I don't make the assumption as much anymore, but it's easy for a Christian to assume that everybody else understands what Christians believe, instead of them using their imagination with what they think Christians believe based on the Christians they've seen out in the wild.
Right.
Christians like
The
our,
wild.
well, like Christians like our politicians. They're like one of the papers, references, how Christianity is weaponized by our politicians. Let's say the Republican Party, and I don't want this to necessarily be a political based thing, but that's a big part of our world today. So, we'll say a couple of things here, because I think they're true. And if we get some backlash, that's fine. I'm not afraid of standing up for Christianity. But, the Republican Party uses Christianity, weaponizes, in my opinion, Christianity. Maybe not all of them. I'm sure there are some people in Congress who are devout Christians. They lead with God first, all this stuff. So I don't want to throw all of them under the bus. But many people, I would suggest, including our president, use Christianity to win elections, use Christianity to make their base happier with them in light of something else going on, stuff like that. Why isn't it just okay for them to say they don't know? Just like so many of our viewers, there was some interview a while ago, after Trump was selling Bibles or something like that. I mean, like, our president was hawking Bibles. Now, I mean, I don't like the guy, but he is our president. I respect the office of our president, but you do start looking at, I didn't vote Democrat either. I voted Libertarian or something.
I didn't vote.
Yeah. But I mean, it was important to me to vote in it, but I wasn't going to vote for Kamala Harris. Just the ideals of the Democratic Party, not necessarily hers specifically. But
did I ever tell you why I don't vote?
No, why?
Did I ever tell you that story? So when I was 18 years old,
because you don't want to you don't want to get called for jury duty.
No, which I actually did get a letter for that, and then I didn't think I had to do it. Anyways, I wonder what happened to that letter, or did I forget about it? Anyways,
I have to do it.
Anyways, so when I was 18, I was living with my brother, and my brother forced me to vote. And I've never been huge into politics. Like, I mean, even especially back then, Facebook wasn't what it was, the media wasn't what it was. So
now
I didn't pay
everybody's
attention.
into politics because it's shoved down our throat. Right.
So I went in and I voted, and I knew nothing about anybody. And I grew up, my dad always said Democrats were for poor people, Republicans were for rich people. That's as far as I knew anything about anything. And I just picked the coolest name on the list because I didn't know who to pick. So I just picked whatever name sounded the coolest. And when I walked out of there, I was like, yeah, I'm that person that probably should not vote if that's how I'm doing it, because I probably would have picked Kanye West when that happened just because it was funny. And
I can respect that. I mean, I had a very similar kind of idea for a while. I didn't vote in elections. To me, it was like, I don't care enough about politics. And so I don't educate myself very much on politics. So I'm not overly qualified to go in and express my opinion. Where there's other people who care much more about it, have research stuff, things like that. But then you start crossing into the thing, well, as an American, there's some level of it being our responsibility. Then you start thinking about, well, can we trust our elections? Just all sorts of complications to it where, now I do vote, but I do vote my conscience, not for who I think is going to win.
Right. And I
the
feel
person
like today,
I voted for. Go ahead.
Today, with the media and with Facebook and with everything going on around us, there's actually more information that even if you aren't political and aren't into politics, you still know what's going on if you watch the news in the world enough to pick something better than whatever name sounds cooler.
Well, and let me just use an example of kind of weaponizing, not just religion, but weaponizing, lies to people. I mean, let's take Trump right now. He ran on several things that were major. He won this election on releasing the Epstein files, on not getting into foreign wars, and things that were important to his base, things that were going to have him win that election. And then he did win the election. So his base then expects him to deliver on those campaign promises. I'm still waiting for my wall, on the southern border from the first Trump term.
Right.
I don't think we should have a wall on our southern border. I mean, I met plenty of nice Mexicans. I haven't run into any murderers or anything. I'm sure they exist, but we have murderers and people, bad people in our country now. And I love Mexican food. So, bottom line is I don't have a problem with Mexico. I obviously don't want drugs and stuff coming in here. But you know what? Even if we put the wall up, those drugs are still going to get in here.
They'll find a way.
But I was promised a wall. I didn't get my wall. I'm upset. My neighbor and I, we joke about that often. And he did vote for Trump, is my understanding, but he's a realist. He can have legitimate conversations with me. And sometimes you're voting for the lesser of evils.
I was going
But
to say,
just to
at this
appease,
point, it's kind of the lesser of two evils.
yeah. Well, and just to appease our MAGA or Trump fans here, in the audience, it's he is our president, and that deserves a level of respect. So even if he is not the first president to make campaign promises and then not deliver, okay, this is not a Trump thing. This is hey, when you get into that level of politics, the political game isn't necessarily based on strong ethics. Let's go that route.
Did you see
with,
how there was the guy recently, a couple days ago, at that White House dinner that tried to assassinate the president again? First of all, he's probably the most attempted assassinated or to be assassinated president ever. Like, they just don't stop. But he actually wrote...
he's not the most attempted to be assassinated president.
Really?
We had presidents way back when who were like, fans of doing duels, like 3 steps, turn and shoot. But you're right. In the modern era.
But go ahead. Sorry.
Well, like, for instance, Reagan, several people had assassination attempts on Reagan, and one of them, I think, hit him. But he ended up being fine, and Reagan was an extremely popular president. John F. Kennedy was assassinated while in office, and he was an extremely popular president. This doesn't just happen to good guys or bad guys. You're always going to have people on different sides of political issues, and, if we could come together and have legitimate conversations without it turning into fistfights and stuff,
right? Well,
it would be better, but that's not where we live. The social media is inciting everybody on both sides, and I don't want to do that,
No.
so go ahead. Then I want to appease to my Trump people with a broader, close the loop, in my opinion. Go ahead.
Right. But did you see that the shooter actually sent a manifesto out to all of his family and friends minutes beforehand? And his main point on it wasn't even political. He was talking about how it's more because Trump's a rapist, and like it's not
It's
even
all
political.
what he imagined was probably in the... Well, I mean, so let's just look at the recent stuff. The Epstein files finally came out. Trump was trying to prevent them to come out, even though he had promised them as part of his campaign. Well, they were about to come out, and all of a sudden there just seemed magically there was a bunch of files that accidentally didn't get released or were too redacted that had him in it. Now, who knows? We don't know what's in those files. So at that point, it's up to our imagination, just like we mentioned earlier. Like, did this place, say they didn't want to do the project with us because we're a Christian organization? Or were they too backed up on projects and they just couldn't do it? Now, they didn't reply to us. So maybe that lets our imagination lean more towards either we upset them by, trying to get them to do it earlier, or there's other reasons, like the Christian thing or something. Who knows? Our imagination goes wild. So maybe this guy was thinking, okay, what's going to be in these files that get released about Trump? Is it going to be, some of the worst things that you might imagine on there, or is it going to be something that, isn't great, but perhaps it wasn't illegal, like maybe 16, 17-year-olds who claim they were 20, something like that, maybe even legal young women, whatever. I mean, but we already knew that Trump has womanizing tendencies. He's been convicted of it before. This should not be a surprise to people. Obviously, we are not condoning pedophilia or anything like that.
No.
And I have no background in what was actually in these files. So all this stuff becomes speculation, but just kind of related to that, as soon as that was about to happen, when the files were about to get released, next thing you know, we're attacking Iran. Nobody's talking about the Epstein files right now, are they?
Nope.
So, now we're attacking Iran. It's a very unpopular war. It didn't end anywhere nearly as quickly. It's still not ended, right? It seemed like it was going to be something that was just going to happen overnight. Now, what do we have? We're still stuck over there. We have a blockade against them. They're not letting other ships through. Price of gas is going way up. Other countries are being very negatively impacted. All of a sudden, Trump is screaming and yelling at all our allies for not helping when he started the war without their, consent or help or whatever. But the point is, we are where we are right now. We
Right.
can't go back and unstart the war. So he's in an unpopular war. He's losing popularity back home. In the United States, this war is not heavily popular at all. It's very unpopular. They have the midterm elections coming up in November. So now it becomes the political game. You got Congress right now. The Republicans control the presidency, the Senate, and the House. Well, there's a pretty good chance they're going to lose the House in the primary or in the midterms. And frankly, he's probably going to lose the Senate as well. So now you'll have a Democrat Congress with a Republican president, and either nothing's going to get done then, or Trump's just going to keep doing whatever he wants to do without congressional approval, because that's what Trump does, but it's also what other presidents have done. And that's kind of an important piece here. I think Trump gets blamed for a lot of things that he does that other presidents also did. I mean, even these Epstein files, we saw other former presidents in there. I'm not condoning any of that. And for all we know, rich people hang out. They all went to this island and they had no idea what this other thing that was happening. I don't want to
right. Well, that goes
speculate
the same for like the Diddy parties. Like there were plenty of people at Diddy parties
had no idea
outside
what was going on.
a regular party,
Right.
had no idea what was
where
going on
if I get
inside.
invited when he was still not that, if I got invited to a Diddy party, I mean, hey, that's, you're going to brag about this or something like that. But now you don't
Right.
even want to be part of it.
Right.
So anyways, I think Trump gets a lot of bad press for some things that he has done that other presidents also did. But I also think that he's very manipulative of the American people, which I'm not sure that other presidents necessarily have done it as much, but we have enabled him. So understand that we elected Trump the first time, then we kicked him out. I understand there's people who are election deniers and things like that. I personally think Trump is an extremely polarizing person. I think that Biden did win that election not because Biden was anything special. I think a vote for Biden was a vote against Trump, and people came out of the woodwork to vote, and that's how it ended. But you know what? 4 years later, we voted Trump back in. That's on us. We picked the guy twice. There's plenty of one-term presidents out there, and there's not very many presidents who served one term, sat out for a term, and then were voted back in.
Right.
I mean, that's impressive. And that's the American people rubber stamping this guy, because his behavior should not be surprising to us. It's not like he got into office and completely shifted gears.
He's
right?
always been this person.
He's always been this person. And even with this Iran war, so we can say, hey, he went and started this war without Congress's approval. Well, that's not the first president who's gone and done that kind of stuff. This is all the political game stuff. But Congress had the opportunity to at least officially try to shut it down. Whether it would have shut him down or not, who knows? But they didn't.
I think a lot of presidents have done similar things to Trump, but Trump's being blamed for it because he's such a high controversial figure.
But hold
right
on,
now.
This isn't even Trump. Our Republican Congress approved this war. It is no longer on Trump. Fine, he started it on his own or in cahoots with Israel or whatever, but the rest of our government, the rest of these people who weaponize Christianity to win their own little elections and stuff like that, who, when you look at their behaviors and things like that, you don't feel that. We're not their judge. We don't know their hearts. Like I said, I'm sure there are plenty of strong, faithful Christians in there, but these people towed the party line and they approved what he's doing. So that's no longer on just him. This is a larger problem than just one man.
Right.
And I think that's an important thing for us to remember. It's easy for us to, there's a Bible verse I come back to often, where it says that you complain about the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a plank in your own. It's along those lines. We're all sinful. We all have impure thoughts. We all manipulate systems, whatever it is. It's so easy for us to point a finger at someone whose entire life is spread all over the internet when we're just lowly people who, hey, even this little podcast type thing, it reaches umpteen thousands people. Anything Trump sneezes, it hits, it hits 8 billion people across the planet. I think as humans, we have to kind of remember that. We have to put that into context, that we have a manipulative system throughout. That's the media. It's capitalism that does that. Even you go overseas, like with this war, Iran is making animations and stuff like that, propaganda against Trump. It's already an unpopular war to try to get the people to further turn on him. It's all a big manipulation, and someone like me, and I don't want to speak for other people, but I'm not an overly political person. So the politics behind this, I get. We have just two sides, and they're not very close to each other in terms of their opinions. Right. That's an unfortunate reality of us today. But a speculation that came out right after that assassination attempt the other day was that, well, the Iran war was pretty unpopular. Did Trump stage his own assassination to take? Because if you've looked at the news since that happened, they're not talking about the war. They're talking about who the suspect was. What Trump said about the assassination attempt. Now, I have no evidence about that. I would say I don't believe that's the case. The real problem, though, is the fact that it is believable. You wouldn't put it past. We wouldn't put it past him to do that. That doesn't mean it happened, but it's problematic that we believe it. I think one of the comedians did something a couple of weeks ago along a similar line. I don't remember which comedian it was, but they had some fake headline that something that Trump said that was ridiculous. This is right after the Easter morning message where he I think in that same skit they were talking about if you remember back when Nobel Peace Prize was up and Trump was angling to get the Nobel Peace Prize, because of all the wars he stopped and things like that. Well, he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize, so then he started complaining. Well, these other places go and suck up to him. So what happened? FIFA, the soccer people, invented a peace award and gave it to Trump. Fine. So he's the first recipient of the FIFA World Peace Award.
That
Great.
is hilarious.
But so now what do we have? So the comedian's like, okay, so you have a FIFA World Peace Award recipient who has gone online in writing and said something along the lines of he's about to annihilate an entire civilization. And at the end of that, he said, praise be to Allah. If I went on social media right now and I typed that, I would probably get arrested.
Right.
This is I don't know. Everyone was talking about war crimes and things like that. You look at the history of the world, there's been worse things than that. But the irony of he just got this peace prize, he ran on no foreign wars, yet he's talking about destroying a civilization. He has a lot of bombastic talk. You got that whole thing about if you've heard Taco, Trump always chickens out, and so he tends to be a lot of bark, not so much bite. Right. But that doesn't make it any less just, like upsetting when you see stuff like that. Go ahead.
Did you see that Jimmy Kimmel's in a ton of trouble because it was like the day before he made a comment to Melania that she was like a beautiful almost widow, and then the next day the assassination attempt happened. It's like the jokes can get you in trouble.
Well, but they shouldn't. No, they shouldn't get him in trouble. I mean, he's a comedian, he's someone who has a show where, something along the lines of the news is delivered, but in a comedic way. That's not where you should get your world news. And, obviously Trump and Kimmel have a history, with that. And Trump anybody who speaks negatively of him, he wants gone. Anybody who speaks positively of him, he loves until he throws him under the bus. This is his MO. I don't even understand why people want to go and work for him, but plenty of people do. There must be perks in there. But again, Trump is not the only person that's like this. Trump isn't the only Republican who's like this. And the American people have elected him twice, and Congress has approved his current actions. So it's not fair to blame the individual man when we have a government set up to control the three branches by checks and balances. And it is not, well, it is doing that. And the way it controlled it is to approve what we are doing, at least at the time when they did that, when they had that vote. So this is not just on him. So I'm not willing to say, I don't like him, but I respect that he's our president. And what comes with that, Trump takes the position of a strong military. Now, it's easy for us at home, and my wife is a high anxiety person. I know you're a high anxiety person as well. My wife's afraid of a lot of things. So when you say that, we have significant safety at home due to the strength of our military, there is a comfort in that. Imagine all these other places in the world where, they don't know if there's going to be, the missile sirens going off tonight. And, who knows what our future is going to look like. But the point is that we might not like it, but those big guns give us a lot of protections here at home that we maybe don't appreciate as much as we should. I'm not a fan of us being the world bully, but
do we
it
have
does let us sleep
sirens?
at night.
I know we have tornado sirens. We have missile sirens.
I'm sure we do. Because back during the Cold War with the Russians, this was just in the early 80s and well, later than that, actually, most of the time in the 80s, and then before that, we had bunkers and things like that. A lot of these old bunkers are getting turned into, the ultra rich are converting them into like doomsday bunkers that are like super luxurious and stuff like that, I think. Except most of the big tech billionaires have one of those or have been working on them. It's been, in the news at some point. I don't like politics, period, and I don't like the way our politics works, but I don't have a fix. So it's difficult to complain about something unless you're going to offer a way to repair it.
Right.
And I'm just not sure that's the world we live in. And swinging that back into our world here, God tells us we are in a fallen, sinful world. It should not shock us at all that we have all this sin surrounding us. But I was saying with the comedian that he had some fake headline, but he didn't say it was fake at first. He said, the other day, Trump said X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 and everybody who was watching that believed it because it sounded like something he would say, even though he didn't actually say it. And I view that as the bigger problem. It's not about the person. It's about that we've become so desensitized to this way of life and this kind of stuff happening on the news on a daily basis that we just kind of accept it and move on. We're not really outraged by it. So, having said that, and knowing that we only have 10 minutes left,
we didn't even get to the topic.
I haven't got to the topic yet. But
so we might have to film a second one just to do the topic.
It could be true. But maybe to be quick. So I was going to say, speaking of outrage, let's talk about whether women are less than men.
In what sense of the word?
Well, there's places in the Bible that people will use to point to and say, well, God said, that men control, have authority over the women and women shouldn't speak in church and things like that. These things get taken out of context. They don't read the rest of that.
Where did that come from? Like, I understand that woman was created from the rib of man. Like, I get,
here, I brought a couple
how does that
of
make
things
him
here.
better?
Well, make him better is something, interesting, I suppose. So first of all, let's just go with Genesis 2:18. When you just mentioned that, Eve, woman, was made from the rib of man.
Yes.
And something that's often says Eve was made to be Adam's helper. Now, as a modern day person, when somebody is made to be my helper, that almost is like, hey, this is somebody who's around to do the jobs that are kind of beneath me. It can come off that way. But the Hebrew word for helper there is the word ezer or ezer. I'm not sure exactly the pronunciation. There's lots of times in the Old Testament where that same word is used when God helps humans. So does that mean God is also beneath man? That's a harder thing to sell.
Not a chance.
to sell that thing. So I think a lot of these things do get taken out of context. So now let's go on the flip side of it with the position that has been taken more recently that a woman can do anything a man can do. Even let's take our recent assassination attempt on Trump. Similarly to the previous assassination attempt on Trump, when you have these people that are getting him out of the room quickly. When I was having this conversation with Tabby last night, if your job is to protect the president of the United States physically as a Secret Service agent, we want the absolute top people in that field to protect our president.
Mhm.
And the people who should be within 5 feet of our president, who can get him out of the room quickly and safely, are all going to be men.
I think there was a female when he got shot in the ear, and that became a big
And this
thing.
time. And this time.
There was this time too. Okay.
But I think that these things get twisted. I'm not saying that women can't be Secret Service agents. In fact, I'm of the opinion that men and women are both equally valuable in God's eyes. I believe that God, well, first of all, you cannot create new life. There's 2 ways of creating new life: God and a man and a woman coming together to create life. That's how life is created. So man needs woman. This isn't an optional thing. What we were talking about last night, and because it kind of came up, we were talking about, obviously, in most of the physical sports, is a woman. There are plenty of women who are better basketball players than tons and tons and tons of men. But the best basketball players on the planet are all men. It is a physical sport. Women cannot compete at that level of physicality. So the top in that thing are going to be men. But then you drop down and there's an interesting twist on this, and you look at chess. The top chess players are also men. So you ask yourself, why? Because now this isn't a physical thing, right?
That's a brain thing.
Or is it? But so let's say it's a brain thing. Does that mean women's brains are weaker than men's brains? Are they lesser than men's brains? I'm of the opinion that men and women are different. I hope that most people can see that as an obvious, right? I think that men are more, in general, are more wired to be hyper-focused on 1, 2, or 3 things. Where I think women I think women are much more well-rounded. I think
and our
that,
brains
sure,
are going 1,000 miles a minute all the time.
but you consider that typically a woman is going to be a better caregiver on average than a man for raising children. That doesn't mean men shouldn't be involved in that part of it, but effectively a woman needs to be able to raise these kids through all these different age groups and teach them right from wrong and all this stuff. Dad's maybe the enforcer, mom's maybe the nurturer, whatever it is. But women have to have a lot of talents across a lot of different things in order to do that. Women do amazing things. They do tons of stuff that men can't do in general.
Or
Similarly,
don't want to.
or similarly, there's plenty of things men can do that women aren't in general going to be as good at. And both of those things together make this world work and brings new life into this world. So men, I think, can become hyper-focused on something, and that's how they become the people who have these, let's say, chess as a talent. They become so hyper-focused on that, and maybe there's some aggression things in there and things like that just make the top of the top better.
I
Take these
wonder,
Secret
though,
Service guys. Oh, go ahead.
if emotion has a lot to do with it too, because men aren't as emotional as women. So I feel like they accomplish things differently because of either not being very emotional about it, or anger and frustration and
Mhm.
whatever is different to like a female's emotion can be
But
all over the place.
But this case, Tabby brought this up last night. Fine. Does that mean with the Secret Service thing, does that mean a female should not be a Secret Service agent?
No.
Absolutely not. In fact, Tabby mentioned, well, maybe you want a female kind of up in the rafters scanning the room, looking
Mhm.
for things that look suspicious, women's intuition, things like that. Perhaps that's a job that we shouldn't have any men doing, you know, perhaps the people who are best at that in the world are going to be women. So we want them. I mean, if I'm the president and I might have people shooting at me, I want to be surrounded with like former Army Rangers and SEALs.
Right.
These guys have killed some people. I want some, 6'4", guy who could lift me up
Right.
and drag me off the stage, because that's the requirements for that job. And the best people on the planet at that job, we want to hire the best of the best. The best people on the planet for that specific job are all going to be men. There are other jobs that the best people for the job will be women. So I think we should always look at hiring the best for any job. And this is where you start getting into, interesting stuff with these DEI things. Like, should the government be able to tell a company that you can't not hire someone because they're female? Can you not hire someone? I ran into this recently, hiring a new faculty member where if we had an international person and an American up for the same job, if we wanted to hire the international person, we have to defend to our government why they were a better fit for the job description. And not only is that often difficult when you're comparing two finalists and you're using, who knows what's best for Concordia University's computer science department? Me or the U.S. government? I'm very close to the ground there. I'm going to know what the department actually needs. So I'm going to be able to say that while it might be difficult to articulate, this international person is the better fit for our situation, whereas I might not be able to defend that to the government. Fine, I get it. So maybe the government should butt out of that side of things and let a company decide what their hiring practices should follow. Now, that doesn't mean, a company then can do whatever they want. They could even put in a job description that, one of the requirements is to be a man if they want to.
Well, I have a question for you. But
that might not go over great with the applicants, right?
Right.
No. A company can do it. I'm just saying the company, it should be up to them how they want to go through their hiring process, and then let the people decide if that's a company worth working for. So I'm in no way trying to diminish the applicants. I'm just saying who is most qualified to decide who's the best for that job.
Right. Now, here's my question. So this goes back along the lines as to the whole men better at things than women or whatever. Why is it then that all of these people who are making all of these shooting attempts and stuff, they're all men? You don't see females trying to assassinate the president. You don't see females, and that is also in a man category.
And maybe that comes down to, well, first of all, aggression. Perhaps. I mean, I think generally, men will be more aggressive than women, and maybe it's more of like serious aggression.
I was going to say, you haven't met a lot of women then.
Well, no, you got the whole stereotype with women catfighting and things like that. You got all these stereotypes floating around, but like, let's say, you see the videos on TikTok or whatever where, I think the one I'm thinking about is there was some guy sitting at the bar, and this woman starts getting up in his face, screaming and yelling at him. And, he just has had it, and he turns around and she just, next thing you know, she's on the ground unconscious. So is that real aggression?
Right.
Type thing. It's not that women can't be dangerous. I'm just suggesting that men's aggression maybe has an intention of more follow through, or could. I don't know. This is one of those subjects that you gotta walk the tightrope, I suppose. But
right. Well, let us know in the comments what you think, because I'm curious.
Tell us what you think. Do women actually suck as bad as we say they do?
We do not.
Well, you just said that. You said men suck because you said that all the assassins are men, which, by the way, historically, when we look at this, most of the assassins are white men. We can get all into the whole Black Lives Matter side of things. Maybe it's kind of like, hey, humans come in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, and genders, and they all have value.
Levels.
Yeah. But they all have value with their own God-given gifts. They all have a place in this world. Something I used to say to students, at least, I think, when we had conversations kind of like this outside the classroom, is this is why communism makes sense on paper, or socialism on paper. You can kind of decide where the line in the sand is. The idea there is that, well, everybody gets paid the same for doing the job that they're best at. People bring different talents to the table. So then you look at this and say, okay, who should get paid more, a janitor or a heart surgeon, and why?
Obviously a heart surgeon. I
Oh,
mean,
I'm so glad you said that. Go ahead and tell me why.
well, I feel like their job requires a lot more learning, a lot more schooling, a lot more attention to detail. I mean, you're saving someone's physical life. Whereas a
Okay.
janitor, I mean,
So,
cleaning
sorry.
and I mean, you're cleaning and whatever else the janitorial duties involve aren't life or death situations.
Also glad you said that. So one side is we're saying, well, we are going to add dollars to salary based on how much you've learned and how much training you've had, how specialized you are. Now, I agree that can be valuable in many situations. Now, who has saved more lives, the heart surgeon or the janitor?
Probably the heart surgeon.
Probably not.
From slipping and falling? Is this what we're talking about?
No, bacteria. More people have died historically from diseases, from bacteria and things like that. That's why, you go back into the Roman times, how you always, you go to the bathroom upstream so it flows down, but you don't want to live downstream and drinking the water out of the river downstream from a Roman city because that's tainted water. It's dangerous. Janitors remove bacteria from our, world. So fine, it's not a flashy job. You don't have to have real specialized training for doing that job. You have to be willing to clean a toilet. I'm guessing a lot of those heart surgeons, a lot of those heart surgeons don't want to go clean toilets. So if we're actually valuing who saves more lives, then really that brain surgeon, or I'm sorry, really that janitor should get paid more money. But would the heart surgeon go and be a heart surgeon if he got paid less than a janitor?
Right. Well, I feel like there's a lot of important jobs out there in the world that like they're paid garbage and they serve like an extreme role. Like you think about it like the garbage man. I mean, if he didn't come every day or
We're right
once
back
a
to
week
the
or whatever.
bacteria
Exactly.
and disease.
There's trash
Yep.
everywhere, littering the world. But they make
Even
nothing,
let's
and
look
it's
in
looked
our
at as
medical
a gross
industry.
job.
Let's look in our medical industry. You deal with them. I deal with them every week with my wife going in for her treatments. Yeah, sure. We are very reliant. We really like our oncology team. We have a nurse practitioner who my wife likes a lot. We also have an oncologist who is very talented. Those two
Lucky.
together. Well, but those two together make the team that we like.
Right.
My wife connects a lot more with the nurse practitioner, the woman, but then when the woman doesn't know the answer to something, she will go to the oncologist who has that specialization. Okay. But my wife would prefer to have a lot of the conversations, the general conversations with the woman. But now you get outside of that first office. Who's doing all the work? The nurses, right? The nurses are doing all the work. They're the one hooking up tubes, putting in IVs, taking care of the patients, changing bedpans, all this stuff, right? Yet the doctors are getting paid obviously much more than the nurses. This is a capitalist type thing. And part of it is because if we want to have people going into specialized things like oncology and stuff like that, that takes all this time and money to invest in education and that kind of stuff. If we're going to entice them to do that, because we still need that oncologist. Sure, the nurses have helped more people. The janitors have saved more lives. The garbage men have saved more lives. But those are jobs that require specialization. So we're saying that we value time, we value investment in education, and we value the specialization because we need those specialists in order to solve the edge cases. So in computer science, we call them edge cases. It's easy to solve the general case of most problems. You can get to the solution. You can get to the 80% solution. It's the 20% or the 10% or the 1% part of the problem where you really need that senior engineer or computer architect to go in and dig deep. And that requires that stronger background in computer science. That's where it's going to take someone more with my background, where I spent a lot of time in school to get a PhD in computer science, but that only lets me solve 5 or 10% more of the problems than somebody coming out as a freshman or coming out as an undergrad with computer science. That's what you're really paying for, is that last little loop. And we call those obviously, often edge cases,
Which
things that are a
it's
little bit outside the norm.
Well, I think this thing that sucks with this whole model is like, obviously the doctor specializes and went to school longer and paid all this money to do that and whatever, and may have, because he specializes, have more knowledge in this specific topic. Well, like when Tabby was first diagnosed, I think it was right about the same time that I started going through my cancer journey. And I've dealt with so many doctors and nurses, and the nurses are amazing. The nurses they are so on top of it. And then you bring in the specialized doctor to come in, and he's getting paid the same as another specialized doctor. But this one doesn't know his head from his feet, and he's getting paid all this money to specialize in something and
Well,
doesn't
you
even
run
know
into
what he's
that anywhere.
doing.
Not every college professor is created equal. In fact, they have that, the saying that, those who can't do, teach. Now, that's even an interesting thing. That's not necessarily a knock on professors, because professors are there in many times to deliver theory. They might be very book smart, for example, but they can't put it into practice. So they can't do. So maybe they're not great at applied, but they're good at theory. Where someone who's out in industry might not know as much about theory, but they can apply it. They know how to use the tool. You could have well, we see it in professional sports. Oftentimes the coaches of these NBA teams, maybe they're former players, but they're not all that. Maybe they're former college players or something. So they're surrounded by players who are better at basketball than they ever were in many cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're coaching them because they have a high basketball IQ. They're good at teaching the theory of basketball and how do we win games? How do I take this particular team and take all my puzzle pieces, all my chess pieces, and go and win this game utilizing those chess pieces in the right way? When do I take someone out? What do I have the small team on the floor right now that's kind of extra fast? Do I put bigs out there? They're not going to be as fast, but they can defend the basket. There's all sorts of variables in these things that, sure, those coaches, well, sometimes they're making zillions of dollars too, but you kind of get my point. Is
that makes a lot of sense.
A competency looks like different things. So I'm a computer science professor. I run a computer science department, but I do a lot of applied stuff. So I'm involved in the real world quite a bit. But I enjoy my position as a professor. I enjoy teaching less now than I used to. And I think that has more to do with the young people. And maybe that's a whole nother podcast. So let me not go down that path. But the point is that I also enjoy the schedule that being a professor gives me, because it allows me, I only have to be physically present at an exact time when I'm teaching my actual classes. Outside of that, it's up to me to schedule my meetings and my office hours. And when I have time to do other things, I have responsibilities. I have to get my stuff graded on time for my students. And, I'm expected to, make sure that, they're able to get FaceTime with me and stuff like that. But I have a lot of flexibility with my schedule. And that's very valuable to me personally because of all these other things that I do. But I couldn't sit there working for some company as a software engineer 8 hours a day, coding all day. I kind of do that almost myself anyways at home, but I'm choosing to do it. I'm choosing to work on the stuff that I want to work on.
And that's where it stops becoming work, when you actually enjoy what you do.
Right.
Because like me today, I've been so excited working on my children's book because I enjoy doing it. If you put me in an office and told me you have to sit and make this children's book and do this, that, and the other, and guidelines, it wouldn't be fun for me anymore. Then it's work. I love my job. Anyways,
just kind of closing things down. I know we're over, but I also have my so we're probably close. Is just to be clear in the end here, and I want to be very clear when it comes to a controversial thing. There are only two genders. I'm going to stand by that all day long. I have respect for these people who struggle with gender identity and things like that. I don't hate those people, okay? But God made us to be man and woman. That's a line from the Bible in Genesis. Mm-hmm. But man is not greater than woman. Man and woman are meant to be together, and they are better together than either of them are apart. And that is God's design for us. But men and women are also different. And different does not mean worse. Right. They are different, and we're good at different things. And if men didn't have women, men's lives would be a whole lot harder. And if women didn't have men, women's lives would be a whole lot harder.
Easier?
You've seen me and Tabby. We're on two different extremes of the world. We were both nerds and I like to think pretty intelligent people, but we have very different styles. So neither of us would be considered normal on anybody's skin. But you put us together, we're like almost a normal person.
Almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, just almost, right? I'm the one who's skewing it bad. You're right.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's cut it off there before we dive down another topic. But, hopefully this was kind of helpful to think through, some of these, they're tough subjects. But so often we point blame at people. We say, hey, I hate this politician, or hey, men are the stronger sex, whatever it is. We so often say things that come from places of ignorance. And if we step back and think about how we all need each other and the world goes around because of all the different things that people do in this world, I think we'd probably be a better society. I don't know if we can ever get there. We're in a sinful world. So, we screwed up. But, hopefully we can reach as many Christians or as many people as possible with a Christian message. And rather than getting mad at us or thinking that we're trying to brainwash people, we're trying to make sure you're not ignorant of what Christians actually believe, not what you see Christians who say they're Christian, how they behave, because how they behave is not what we agree with. So I'll stop on that comment. Once again, this has been the Skeptic and the Disciple. That's the right order, right?
Yep.
It's the Skeptic and the Disciple, not Disciple and the Skeptic. Skeptic and the
No, I
Disciple.
go first.
I know,
Female
as you should.
supersedes the male in this one.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. So until next time, like I said, we may not, we might be off for 2 weeks because I am gone taking my princess on a cruise because she deserves it. And I want her to be able to watch the ocean and see dolphins. She likes dolphins. But
And he
in
goes
any
on
case,
like
we might be
100
taking 2
cruises a
weeks
year.
off. But what's that?
I said Andy goes on like 100 cruises a year. But anyways.
But for her.
Right. Good point.
I sit at the bar. I sit at the bar and work on my laptop.
That is true.
But so in any case, my wife's my everything. So at the very least, I'm not greater than she is. I'm a much better person because I have her. See, and I'm not even lying.
What'd you do now? What'd you do?
She's gonna ask the same thing when she sees it. But I say that to her often because I believe
you should.
it. I couldn't navigate this world without her. Yeah. So anyways, until I see you next time, I guess that's it. Bye.
That's it. Thanks, guys. Hit that like
right.
Wow.
Like, subscribe, comment on your thing. Yeah. Toodaloo. Oh, toodaloo. All right. Bye.
Thanks for watching The Skeptic and the Disciple.
If you made it this far, you're either very committed or very confused.
Either way, we're glad you're here.
Like, subscribe, and comment below.